Now, during this particular segment, we'll be joined by Mr. Ghias Khan, who is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Engro Corporation Limited. And most recently, Mr. Ghias was the Executive Director and Head of the Chairman's Corporate Office at Dawood Hercules. He was also the Principal Aide of the Chairman of the Group on a range of matters of institutional importance, including but not limited to board governance, communications, external relationships, and special projects. He's also a strong believer in the social enterprise and the responsibility of businesses to environmental and human well-being, and holds an MBA from the Institute of Business Administration in Karachi. Mr. Ghias Khan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Mr. Asif Ikram Saab, President, Management Association of Pakistan, distinguished speakers, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to come and speak on an issue which is not only very timely, but also very, very important. And I must appreciate the presentations that were made by the esteemed speakers before me. The good news over here is that since I'm the only one who stands between lunch and all you guys, I'm going to actually get away by making a small, short speech. So anyway, the rising millennials, love them or hate them. Well, generally, I'm not okay with such binary choices, particularly when a word like hate is used. I think that's perhaps the wrong choice of word and makes me a little uncomfortable. But nevertheless, as one of the esteemed speakers gave a number, that 47% of Pakistan's population is of millennials, one thing is for sure, that A, we need to, first of all, frame this issue right. I don't think it's about loving or hating millennials. I think the key over here is to understand them. And really, if we do a good job of that, then we and all our companies will have a future, otherwise they won't. So, just want to start off by saying that obviously a lot of research around the world and even in Pakistan has been done on the subject of digital disruption and what are some of those businesses which are perhaps more vulnerable to digital disruption. And one of the trends, or perhaps one of the characteristics which came out, was that organizations which had the ability of hiring and retaining millennials are far more capable of competing in the market against those companies which don't have the ability to hire and retain millennials. So that's how important this is. But let's first of all start off by sort of putting down certain myths about the behaviors and attitudes of millennials. So it's thought of that millennials simply don't care. They feel entitled. They are self-interested and narcissistic. They're lazy, impatient, too sensitive, not loyal, and can't take pressure. So I want to now give you my version of the truth, and by no means am I an expert. I'm a student of management. I've had the good fortune of working for a startup, for an IT startup in Pakistan for almost 14 to 15 years. I am now working for a large conglomerate, but I think what probably gives me or perhaps what my biggest qualification over here to talk on this subject is that I'm a father of 3 millennials. So, getting straight into it, millennials, as we all know, are a generation that have grown up in the era of social media. So they're perhaps the first generation which has been exposed to 2 different versions of reality. One is the official version through the media and the government, and the other is the real version, which is built by conversations that they have with people around them. And the difference between us, our generation, and them is that they're a lot more wary of principles, and they don't take them for granted. And they definitely recognize genuineness. And they take you on face value and give you that chance. And I've had some personal experience over here because about 8 to 9 years ago, in my previous company, which was a startup, we decided to run a elaborate management trainee program where we decided to approach LUMS and IBA, and I was told by a lot of people that, listen, which world are you living in? Why would anyone let go of opportunities in large multinationals and decide to, or would be interested in coming to a local company? But I said, well, let me give it a shot. And I actually went to IBA, had a session with the young, with the graduating class over there, and was asked some very, very pointed questions about, the state of our company, about its cash flow issues, about this, that, and I was pretty blatant and very, very honest about the whole thing. And it ended up, even though I thought that we will not be able to hire a lot of people, but ended up hiring something like 15 people from LUMS and IBA. And I think it was a result of the fact that I was extremely candid, a bit too much about the company. And that's not something, perhaps, which would have worked in our times. I remember getting out of college in the late 90s, and the companies that we used to think about at that time was Citibank, ABN AMRO, Unilever, P&G, and we never really used to even consider working for startups, but times have changed. And I guess that shows that it's not that millennials simply don't care, but they're a lot more aware. Millennials, no doubt, expect quick success. They are made to believe throughout their life that they are special, and that after their college, they will land with the dream job. And they will sort of become managers in their late 20s or early 30s. They've actually grown up in times where they've seen college dropouts become billionaires. So just to elaborate that further, and I'll use the example of our current organization, which has a system of promoting people which is directly proportional to their experience and age. And that's not something which is sitting very well with the new generation, with the millennials, and it gives us food for thought to think about how do we create opportunities. Because it's not that they have a sense of entitlement, it's just that they are looking for those opportunities. What they are reminding us of is that the fact that we have a lot of expectations of them, they are reminding us that they have a lot of expectations from us as well. They're self-interested and narcissistic. Well, think about this. They're projecting their identity on multiple screens from a very, very young age. From a very young age, they're judging people and are being judged. I can give you examples of my own kids. They often post pictures of their vacations on Facebook, even though I try to avoid them opening or social media accounts and going on WhatsApp as much as I could. But my son would come up to me and say, well, look, I've won a golf tournament. I want you to put up my picture. It's not that they are very self-interested, but the fact that they have to project themselves in the social media is becoming vitally important, because sooner or later, in fact, even now, it is something which is going to define their personality. And that is what results in them being so self-interested. There is a notion that they're lazy. I sort of kind of disagree with this, because if you give them the right environment, if you give them the right purpose, they're perhaps more hardworking. They don't follow 9 to 6 rules. They will work throughout the night. But the key over here is that if you give them purpose and if you define the job for them in a way which interests them and give them the right environment. Are they impatient? Well, they want instant gratification. That is a reality. Now, we live in a world where there is an app for everything. And for them to get accustomed to corporate life where things take time is a challenge. So there is no doubt that this sort of becomes a challenge. They are certainly very sensitive because they have a lot more empathy. They care a lot more about issues, about causes, about exploitation, about diversity, about environment, about the planet. But this can actually turn into a very big strength, particularly in an era of digital disruption. What is digital disruption? I'm sure, we've been hearing about this for so long, but I don't think all of us or any of us actually really understands the impact of that. But what is very, very clear is the fact that digital disruption is going to lead to organizations become a lot more customer-centric. And this generation of millennials is hardwired to be suitable for that environment because they have empathy, which means that they will understand the customers better than us, and they are very, very comfortable with technology. So the fact that they are very sensitive can actually be translated into a strength keeping in view that they are very, very comfortable in using technology. Not loyal. It's perhaps a fact, even though I've never really backed it up with, I've never really read up on it as such, but one thing's for sure that the time duration that millennials spend on each job is becoming shorter. They're looking to change. That's not because they're not loyal, because I think they're very vocal in calling out areas where the employers are not living up to the standards that they committed to. And they're very, very sensitive to that. So if you make promises, if you say that you will follow your values and you don't end up doing it, that's where you start losing millennials. So it's not just that they're not loyal. We have to ask ourselves that are we really following what we are stating on fancy documents? I think going on to managing pressure, again, this is something which I kind of disagree with, because if you look at how social media has evolved, and something that I touched upon earlier, where kids, teenagers have to get very used to being judged by millions of people around the world, I think that's the kind of pressure that we never really experience. So the pressure that they're going through in their personal life is certainly going to make them more capable of handling professional pressure later on. So kind of disagree with this particular myth as well. Moving on to the next subject, which is what is perhaps the best way to manage millennials? And again, I'd like to state over here that what I'm going to talk about now is perhaps not just specific to millennials. It's some widely accepted management practices, but some of these are highly magnified when you talk of millennials. Number one is direction, and this applies to millennials regardless of the kind of size of organization they work with. And that's something that I've experienced very recently. Most of the millennials, by definition, are in the early stages of their career, but what they expect from you is clarity about the direction and vision of the company. And not just that, they want you to tell them that how they are contributing towards that direction. They want organizations to have a purpose which is beyond profits. It's not just about shareholder value, now it's about shared value, where economic and social returns are intertwined. And, well, very fortunate for me, I work for a company which actually lives by these values. And I have Sarfraz Saab over here sitting right in front, who helped create $1 billion company. And he will tell you himself that it was not perhaps just the pursuit of numbers, but it was also the pursuit of creating thousands and tens of thousands of jobs, which helped the company reach the level it did. I can give you an example of a very large project that we're doing in Thar, in very, very testing circumstances, and on a very, very tight time schedule. But I can tell you, not only is that project very economically viable for the company, it is economically viable for the country as well. But what makes it special is that each and every individual working in that project is more concerned about uplifting that entire society and that entire desolated area than they are about the project. And it's not something that they have outsourced to the CSR function of the company. It has been taken up as a responsibility by each and every line manager. And that's what makes it so special. Millennials not just want recognition, timely recognition, but We also now need to rethink our compensation philosophies as well. A fixed salary will not do the trick. Them having a share of reward they helped create is very important, and that's, of course, food for thought for all us business leaders. They want to watch us live our values. And from what I've read and what I've experienced, and I think perhaps one of the ways how they watch an organization live its values is how we hire people, why and when we fire people, and who gets promoted. I think that's perhaps these three are the most important areas where a millennial will watch you live your values. So this is something that we obviously need to be very, very mindful of. Lastly, be regular and very open in our communication with them. We live in a world, of course, where we are judged by end results, but millennials are perhaps far more interested in the journey, not just the end result. And it's not about, and believe me, they'll be very, very open to disagreeing with you, to stating their opinions against some of the decisions you make, which is okay. But I think what is also important is that sometimes, or most of the time, where we can, spend time in actually explaining to them that why we made certain decisions. Moving on to the next section, which is the most interesting one, perhaps, and has been covered by my esteemed colleagues before me, so I'm not going to spend that much time, which is millennials as customers. And they are, as you would know very well, they are growing in an era of shared economy, where perhaps this particular generation is least ownership obsessed in history. They're growing up in times of Uber, of Careem, of Airbnb. And, a few years down the road, you're going to be talking about a generation which is there in times of driverless cars and drone delivery of groceries. So they don't only want quality, but they want convenience. They're very, very comfortable in purchasing stuff online, and they will only go to physical stores if those stores actually inspire them. They believe in taking opinions on social networks from their network, so it is very, very important now for brands to be actually part of those conversations. Wellness matters for them. Diversity matters to them. But what is very, very interesting now, and these trends are sooner or later going to catch up in Pakistan as well, that with the advent of digital and big data, what is now needed and what is expected by millennials is from the multi-billion-dollar organizations, that they are expecting a tailored sales and marketing strategy for them. And that is going to be the challenge in understanding them. In summation, I just want to say that there is no way you can hate the millennials. They are certainly a massive, massive opportunity. If you can understand them, if you can manage them, and if you can learn how to sell to them, in the process, you will realize that you have transformed your business. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.